In this video, we are going to learn about DNS or domain name system, where I'm going to explain the theoretical answer and give you a practical example and as well as show you how it works to get a better understanding on everything related to DNS. Let's go into the video. Hi guys, it's Alston. As I mentioned, I'm going to explain DNS system right now. First, let me give you the theoretical answer for DNS, which is domain name system is a hierarchical and decentralized naming system used to identify computers, services, other resources reachable through internet or other internet protocol IP networks. This might sound confusing, to be honest, especially if you are a beginner or student. If you are in this field, you will understand it perfectly. So in this video, what I thought, why not make a video to make it simplified with some example and as well as showing a step-by-step instruction on how it works. So let me go into that. First, let me make it simple. If you are on a web browser and you want to go into any website or something like that, you will open up a web browser, go into the search bar and type the domain name like youtube.com, facebook.com or digitalmarketingmind.com, where internet is really big, where there is almost around 1.88 billion websites on the internet, and using names or brand is much more easier for us since we are able to remember that very well compared to something like numbers. Even remembering name is sometimes difficult, but name is definitely much better than number. The problem is in internet, it does not understand text when you want to connect to website. It uses series of numbers called IP address. But from a user's perspective, remembering these numbers is really difficult, especially if you are browsing 100 different websites, then you are needed to remember 100 different IP addresses. That is where DNS comes into play, where the job of DNS is to translate or resolve, we use the technical term resolve, these domain names into IP addresses. That is the purpose of DNS. Let me give you another example to make it much more clearer. If you are using mobile phone, there will be a contacts app. The purpose of contact app is to save numbers of friends, families or your known one, where it's easier to remember their names or way of identifying them compared to just remembering all their mobile numbers. So you don't need to remember their mobile number. All you need to remember is their name or their identification text. And when you want to give a call, you are not going to remember them by the number. Instead, you are just going to click on the contact and give a phone call and it will connect to that number. That same exact process happening on internet is called DNS system. So DNS plays a huge role in the modern day networks because it allows us to communicate in a simple form when we want to look up and connect with website, and the purpose is to convert the domain names to numbers, which is called IP address. Where we say connect, it's technically mean resolve them into the IP address. Let me show you how this works so you can get a better idea on this. So I have created step-by-step instructions, to be honest. The first step is we are deciding which website to go. For example, in this example, I want to go to youtube.com to watch a video, maybe like this one. So you open up a web browser like Firefox, Chrome, any web browser, can be in your mobile devices or even in your computer devices. You open up that browser and you enter the youtube.com and press enter. What happens immediately is the step 3 gets triggered, where your device, computer or web browser will check something called cache memory to see whether do I know what is the IP address for this particular domain name. If we are using going to the same websites again and again, it will save these data into cache memory. So if it knows that IP address for that particular domain name, it won't even go into the DNS lookup and everything. Simply it will return the IP address then and there itself. You don't need to go into the step 4 and everything. But in case if it wasn't able to find these addresses, now that there is a process will be triggered, something called DNS lookup, where the reason for DNS lookup is just simply to find the IP address for the domain name we are requesting. So it goes into the domain name system or DNS. In some example images, if you have seen DNS checked on DNS, sometimes you just won't find all this data. Instead, there will be only one server which is called DNS server, and request comes into the server and request goes into that. Where that is a simplification process of everything happening within DNS system. But there are several processes happen within DNS system also, where I will explain that as well. So inside this, all of this is something called DNS, where everything inside here is working towards to finding the IP address for your domain name. The first request it goes is to call something called DNS recursive server, or we also call that as recursive resolver. It asks for the IP address, and the IP address request which comes through this is called recursive DNS query. That is the technical term, to be honest. And most of the time this particular server is managed by your internet service provider, also known as ISP, where these are the people who are providing internet service for your personal use, something like Geo Fiber, Joker Fiber, Airtel Internet, or if you are using some other internet provider. You can also customize, instead of using ISP, you can use third-party DNS system like Google DNS, or if you are in an organization environment, if you know networking and how to customize it, you can even use your organizational internal one as well. What it will do is it will check on its cache to see whether do I know the IP address for this particular domain name. Most of the time it will have it, since it will keep on serving all the requests which is coming through on this cache. So if it finds the IP address for your request, it will immediately skip all step number 5, 6, 7, 8 and everything, and goes directly to the step 10, where it returns the IP address to the client. In case if it's not able to find it, it will send the request to something called root server, which is a top hierarchical server, where this server does not contain any IP address for domain name. What it will do is it will have information on top level domains or TLD servers. It will have those kind of, what do I mean by TLD is, TLD is the last part of your website name. For example, google.com, youtube.com, digitalmarketingmind.com, where the last .com or .net, .org, .edu, any number of extension, that last part we called it as TLD. So what it will do is it will have information on, if we are sending a request for, let's say example, youtube.com, it will know where should I contact for the .com domain servers. So it will contain that information, and there are over hundreds of root servers around the world, but all of them use 13 different IP address. In this example, since I am requesting youtube.com, it will send the request to .com TLD server, where that is the step 7. It request goes into something called TLD server. Again, here also it does not contain any IP addresses. It will contain information on that particular domain related information. So what it will do is it will try to see a matching entry for the domain name we requested, and if it found, it will go and see what is the contact detail I need to go in order to receive those IP address for that particular domain name. That is the process where it will send that particular request to something called authoritative name server, where this is the last step where we found the TLD list. Inside that we found the domain name. Now we are looking specifically within that domain name what are the details such as IP address and all other data. Authority name server is the last hope to find the IP address, where if it find the IP address in step 9, it will send the IP address back to the DNS resolver. For some reason, if it's unable to find this particular IP address, then it will send a DNS error message back to the DNS resolver, where DNS resolver will send it back to the web page, web browser. In case as soon as this particular one request is sent to the DNS resolver, what recursive resolver will do is send the request, the IP address for the request back to the client, and as well as store that particular detail on its cache memory. Because if the same thing again happens, or a same person on that network or ISP requests the same thing within a particular time frame, then it will avoid all these additional steps and immediately send the request back from here itself, where it will be reducing couple of milliseconds or even couple of seconds. If you are on a slow connection and everything, it will send that data back to this. So step 9 is now the DNS naming system or DNS system, this whole thing will send the IP address for the requested domain name back to the web browser itself or the client which requested the data. The step 12, the step 11 is where now web browser will know, okay, in order to go to youtube.com, I need to use this particular IP address to connect it. So using that IP address, it will connect to the web server and request website files or web pages or video files or whatever the files hosted on that web server. And this knows, okay, this person has requested this data, I need to send that. So step 12, where the web server will send the web page file or website file back to the browser. So all this will happen, to be honest, on behind the scenes where you won't even notice this happening. When you type something, usually the website will load in 1 second or couple of seconds in most time, where all these things will be happening on this, and that is how DNS work. I hope that explains it. If you have any other questions or doubt, feel free to ask me in the comment, and if I know the answer, I will be helping you out. I hope this video was helpful. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Cheers.